Hey, I totally get what you're saying about the situation in the Middle East. It seems like there's this emerging alliance among various powers, all responding to what's happening with Israel and the US. And at the same time, we're engaging in what we claim are targeted strikes against Iranian-backed Shiite militias in places like Syria and Iraq. But you're pointing out that it might be a bit of a misconception to assume that all these groups are taking orders directly from Iran. The Iraqi militias, for instance, more like nationalist organizations, even though they're Shiite, they're acting independently. Those attacks on U.S. positions, they seem more like signals and warnings rather than full-scale offenses. It's almost like they're trying to make everyone aware that things could escalate into a major conflict with Israel and the U.S. I get the sense that we're responding to these signals by deploying carrier battle groups, increasing our ground presence in Syria and Iraq, and setting up air defense units. But you're highlighting a critical point. We might not be fully prepared for a major conflict. There's a lack of ammunition and logistical support, and those carrier battle groups, which are supposed to be a deterrent, might not be as effective as we think. It's almost like we're relying on this concept of battleship diplomacy, expecting others to back down because we have these powerful military assets. However, you're rightly pointing out that in the 21st century, it's not just about having carrier battle groups that can launch a bunch of cruise missiles and aircraft. Winning wars requires more than that, and the people on the ground are aware of this reality. It's a complex situation, and it seems like the potential for a major war is hanging in the balance. What do you think could be a more effective approach to address these tensions and avoid a full-blown conflict? In recent political developments, there's been a noticeable trend in both the Senate and the House of Representatives that raises concerns about the potential for a broader regional war, particularly with Iran. The focus has been on preemptively granting the president the authority to engage in military actions against Iran, with lawmakers seemingly eager to provide the necessary paperwork and support for such endeavors. One individual expressing apprehension about this situation is raising the alarm on the motives behind these moves. According to this perspective, prominent figures like Lindsey Graham are seen as actively seeking financial support by making bold statements in favor of military actions. The allegations that Graham and others collaborated on crafting legislation that essentially signals to the president that if they wish to go to war with Iran, there is legislative backing ready and waiting. The underlying implication is that this process serves as a means for these lawmakers to attract significant financial contributions to their political action committees and support structures. A critical aspect of this critique is the assertion that these lawmakers, despite their influential roles, lack accountability in the Senate. It is argued that they are not directly responsible for decisions related to the armed forces, rendering their posturing and support for war efforts somewhat disconnected from the actual consequences. The claim is that individuals like Graham merely vote for war, provide financial backing, and then assume no responsibility or oversight for the outcomes of military actions. The narrative also touches on the broader issue of accountability in Washington, emphasizing that the lack of consequences for lawmakers allows for the proliferation of what is described as stupid things. It suggests that the disconnect between those who make decisions and those who bear the consequences creates an environment where posture and political maneuvering take precedence over a genuine understanding of the implications of military actions. Setting aside the criticism of lawmakers and their motivations, the focus shifts to the current occupants of the White House. The assessment is that the administration lacks a cohesive and responsible approach to foreign policy, particularly in the context of potential military engagements. The critique extends to key figures in the cabinet, such as Blinken and Austin, as well as National Security Advisor Sullivan. It is argued that these individuals, while in positions of influence, may not necessarily have the best interests of the nation in mind. Adding another layer to the analysis is the mention of unnamed individuals operating behind the scenes. These individuals, described as largely unknown to the public, are said to include significant donors to the Democratic Party and self-appointed experts. The implication is that decision-making within the administration involves a mix of established political figures and lesser-known actors who may exert influence based on financial contributions or perceived expertise in seeking to contextualize the unfolding situation. The commentator emphasizes the need to consider the broader implications of the move being made. The concern is not solely about the potential for war with Iran, but also about the motivations, accountability, and decision-making processes within the political landscape. This analysis suggests a complex interplay of political posturing, financial interests, and the potential for significant consequences in the realm of foreign policy and military actions. In the current political landscape, there is a growing concern about the influence wielded by individuals who hold appointed but unelected positions, steering the direction of the state and what is perceived as unfavorable trajectories. The speaker expresses a disinterest in engaging in military conflicts, particularly in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. However, recent events and geopolitical maneuver have raised apprehensions about the possibility of being drawn into a regional war. The commentary reflects on past instances, notably in Eastern Europe, where concerns about a potential massive intervention in Ukraine emerge. Drawing parallels, the speaker asserts that the current geopolitical climate resembles the unease felt in the past, signaling a potential shift toward conflict. Despite the lack of initial interest in such conflicts, the speaker suggests that the situation appears to be evolving, and there are growing uncertainties about the nation's preparedness for regional conflicts, especially those involving multiple countries in the Middle East. A critical perspective is offered regarding the capability of the United States to handle a regional war, particularly that might involve numerous nations in the Middle East aligned against Israel and the U.S. This analysis suggests a complex interplay of political posturing, financial interests, and the potential for significant consequences in the realm of foreign policy and military actions. In the current political landscape, there is a growing concern about the influence wielded by individuals who hold appointed but unelected positions, steering the direction of the state and what is perceived as unfavorable trajectories. The speaker expresses a disinterest in engaging in military conflicts, particularly in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. However, recent events and geopolitical maneuver have raised apprehensions about the possibility of being drawn into a regional war. The commentary reflects on past instances, notably in Eastern Europe, where concerns about a potential massive intervention in Ukraine emerged. Drawing parallels, the speaker asserts that the current geopolitical climate resembles the unease felt in the past, signaling a potential shift toward conflict. Despite the lack of initial interest in such conflicts, the speaker suggests that the situation appears to be evolving, and there are growing uncertainties about the nation's preparedness for regional conflicts, especially those involving multiple countries in the Middle East. A critical perspective is offered regarding the capability of the United States to handle a regional war, particularly one that might involve numerous nations in the Middle East aligned against Israel and the U.S. The assessment is that the country is presently even less prepared and capable than before, raising questions about the feasibility of engaging in such a complex and widespread conflict. The commentary shifts to recent diplomatic activities involving Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. The speaker highlights a meeting between the Iranian leadership and President Erdogan, Turkey, following discussions between their foreign ministers. While the details of these discussions are not disclosed, the speaker knows President Erdogan's remarks pointing out global appall at the events in Gaza and expressing dissatisfaction with the silence from the United States and its Western allies. This prompts the speaker to question the perceived lack of response from the U.S. and its allies to the situation in Gaza, particularly in light of diplomatic engagements between key players in the region. It's clear that there's a significant shift in the dynamics, especially when it comes to the capabilities of various nations. Back in the day, there was a tendency to underestimate Russia, assuming it was weak and couldn't do much beyond responding to our demands. We had to learn the hard way that this was far from the truth. Now, a similar miscalculation seems to be happening in the Middle East. We're not in 1973 anymore. It's been 50 years, and the landscape has changed. The countries in the region have grown more capable both in terms of their populations and their ability to act decisively. Turkey and Iran, in particular, stand out with populations nearing 90 million each. The Iranians, for instance, boast some of the world's best experts in air, missile, and space technologies. They've assembled an arsenal of missiles with the potential to inflict significant damage on Israel if unleashed. Then there's Turkey, capable of mobilizing 2 million troops in a month, backed by a formidable army and equipped with new missiles that pose a threat not only to Israel, but also to our offshore naval power. What's noteworthy is the overwhelming support these nations receive from their populations. The entire region seems to be united in their anger over what's happening in Gaza. Initially, critical of Hamas for what they saw as excessive actions, public sentiment has shifted drastically as the death toll in Gaza has risen. With over 10,000 casualties, including thousands of children, women, and elderly individuals. It's a complex situation, and the emotional response from the people in the region adds another layer of volatility. How do you think these shifts in power dynamics and public sentiment should be factored into our approach to the situation? Situation in the Middle East is truly concerning, especially with the mounting anger among the people in the region. They're closely following the events through television and mass media, and the lack of intervention, particularly from the United States, has left them enraged historically. Presidents have stepped in during crisis to assert control, as we saw with the Suez Canal situation in 1973. Back then, there was a direct warning about crossing the Suez Canal as it could lead to a warlike status with Russia. The destruction of Egypt was something Russia would not tolerate. The intervention occurred, and an agreement was reached. However, the current scenario is different. Despite the severe actions like the carpet bombing of Gaza, there's a noticeable absence of intervention or a strong stance against it. Prime Minister Netanyahu seems to wield more influence and authority in Washington than President Biden. Reflecting on your statement from